What if Rhaegar Targaryen survived the hammer blow at the Trident and came north to find the son he never met? Let's explore the depths of it in the video. The Ruby Ford sits on the northern bank of the Trident River, a broad crossing of pale stones that glitter in peacetime and turn the color of old copper when it rains. On this day, in 283 AC, it is neither raining nor peaceful. Two great armies have met at this crossing, and the shallow water between them has run red since early morning. Bodies drift south in the current. Banners go down and are picked up by men who are themselves about to go down. The noise of it is immense, the kind of noise that gets into a man's chest and makes breathing feel like work. Prince Rhaegar Targaryen commands the loyalist army from the center. He rides on a grey destrier, wearing his night-black plate with the three-headed dragon of House Targaryen worked in rubies across the breastplate, the gems catching the pale afternoon light against the darkness of the armor. Beneath the plate, invisible from any distance, sits a layer of golden ringmail, tight against his body and silent. His helm is decorated with streamers of gold, orange, and red silk that stir in the river wind. His hair, where it shows, is silver gold. His eyes are dark indigo. He is 23 years old, and he looks every inch the prince he is, riding through a battle he knows his side is not winning. He has been in the saddle since before dawn. He has watched the rebel host push his men back across most of this afternoon. He is not afraid. He is something colder than afraid. On the loyalist left, Lewin Martell commands the Dornish spearmen, some 10,000 of them sent north by Prince Doran. They have fought hard since morning, and they have bled hard, and the ground they have taken, they have mostly given back. Elsewhere on the field, Barristan Selmy rides for the loyalists with a ferocity that makes men half his age look careless, cutting through rebel soldiers and buying his side time it cannot ultimately afford. But Selmy is one man against a host. The field is a mile wide, and the rebel host does not slow. On the rebel side, Robert Baratheon drives the center like a man who has been waiting for this day for years, because he has. He is massive in his antlered helm with a war hammer that has broken more skulls in this war than his riders have bothered to count. Near him ride Ned Stark and Jon Arryn and Hoster Tully with his rivermen, and Roose Bolton with the Northern Horse. They are winning. They can feel the loyalist line bending under them, and they press harder. Then Robert Baratheon catches sight of Rhaegar at the center of the enemy line, and Rhaegar catches sight of Robert, and the battle around them does what battles sometimes do, when two men with enough weight between them lock eyes across a ford. It opens a path. They come together in the shallows, where the pale stones of the ford glow dull through the red water. Robert charges first, as Robert always does, swinging the warhammer as he comes. Rhaegar does not charge. He holds his ground with his sword up and his horse steady, and he lets Robert come to him. The exchange is fast. Rhaegar opens Robert's sword arm, a clean wound that parts armor and flesh and should put any ordinary man down. Robert Baratheon is not an ordinary man. He does not slow. He adjusts his grip and brings the hammer around with everything he has left. The blow takes Rhaegar full in the chest. There is a sound like a forge hammer striking a shield. The rubies on the breastplate crack from the impact, and a dozen of them fly loose, arcing out into the current and sinking into the pale stones below. Rhaegar goes off his horse and hits the shallows on his back, and the cold river closes over his face. The golden ringmail does not let him die. The blow lands with its full force, and the black plate caves around the point of impact. But beneath the plate the ringmail is dense and tightly woven, and it distributes that force across the whole of Rhaegar's chest instead of driving it through to one killing point. Ribs break. The breath leaves him, as if it has somewhere more important to be. His vision goes dark, and then darker. But the heart beneath all of that iron and gold keeps beating, because the force that should have stopped it never quite reached it. It is a difference of perhaps 2 inches of woven metal. It is the difference between a dynasty ending in this ford and a father making it north. Rhaegar lies face up in the shallows with the trident moving cold and shallow over him, and his lungs locked, and his eyes open to a sky that will not stay still. He is alive. He cannot confirm this yet. Barristan Selmy reaches him before the rebel riders can. He pulls Rhaegar out of the water by the armor straps and gets him onto the bank, then puts a hand to Rhaegar's neck and finds the pulse there, fast and thin and unmistakably present. Selmy has been a Kingsguard since before some of the men on this field were born. He knows what a dead man feels like. This is not that. He calls for horses. He calls for a litter. Rhaegar stirs and reaches for his arm, grip weak, eyes unfocused. Still, Selmy tells him, my prince, be still. The oath the Kingsguard swears is to protect the royal person. The royal person is breathing. Everything else on this field can wait. The loyalist army does not know its prince is breathing. It sees him fall from his horse in the ford, and the center collapses. The Dornish flank comes apart. The rebel host surges across the water and through every gap that opens, and the battle for the Ruby Ford is finished within the hour. Robert Baratheon stands in the shallows and watches the loyalist forces scatter, and he takes this as the complete victory it appears to be. He sends riders to find Rhaegar's body. They search the field for the rest of the afternoon. They find blood. They find a dead destrier with Targaryen colors in the harness. They find rubies caught between the pale stones of the ford, glittering up through the shallow water, like a fortune someone dropped and could not recover. They do not find a body. In the years that follow, the people who live along the Trident will call those rubies dragons' tears. Children will wade the ford at low water looking for them. A fisherman will sell one for more than a month's earnings and tell the story of where he found it for the rest of his life. They are proof, people will say. Proof that the crown prince fell here. Proof that the old dragon bled out into the current and the stones and is gone from the world. The proof is wrong. But it will be years before that becomes anyone's problem. And by the time it does, the problem will have traveled a very long way from this ford. The camp is a quiet, miserable thing. A handful of loyalist riders who still have horses and the will to stay near a prince most of them believe is dying, because dying looks nearly the same as what Rhaegar is doing in this tent. He wakes 3 days after the Trident and spends the first hour uncertain whether he is awake. His chest feels as though someone has rearranged everything inside it without asking. Breathing hurts. Moving hurts. Thinking about moving hurts. He lies still and stares at the roof of the tent and listens to the sounds of men who have lost and know it. Barristan Selmy is there when Rhaegar's eyes finally focus. He sits on a camp stool at the foot of the cot with his sword across his knees, and the expression he always wears when things have gone very badly, which is to say, the expression of a man who has decided that no problem is beyond addressing if he simply refuses to acknowledge that it has frightened him. "Tell me," Rhaegar says. His voice comes out rough and wrong. Selmy looks at him. "You should rest." "Tell me." So Selmy tells him. The host has broken. The rebel lords hold the field. Robert Baratheon will be king. Rhaegar listens to all of this from flat on his back and says nothing. His face is still. Selmy reads that correctly as a man organizing information rather than surrendering to it, and waits. Then comes the news about King's Landing. Tywin Lannister had kept the Lannister host at Casterly Rock through the entire war. He watched and waited, and when the Trident was done, and the Targaryen army was broken, and the road to the capital was clear, he brought his soldiers to the gates of King's Landing and presented himself as a friend, coming to help defend the city. Aerys believed him and opened the gates. Tywin's men poured in, and the city burned and bled, and Tywin called it a service to the realm. Aerys is dead. Jaime Lannister, one of his own Kingsguard, killed him in the throne room before the rebel lords arrived. Rhaegar takes this in without expression. His father had hidden wildfire in cellars and passages beneath half the city, intending to burn everything rather than surrender it. Whether Jaime's sword was mercy or politics, or the act of a young man who saw an opportunity and took it, Rhaegar cannot say. He suspects it was all three. "Elia," Rhaegar says. Selmy is quiet for a moment. Then he tells him. Elia Martell is dead. Gregor Clegane killed her in Maegor's Holdfast, in the kind of way that makes the manner of it part of the telling. Rhaenys is dead. The baby Aegon is dead. The children Rhaegar left in King's Landing when he rode to war are gone, and they were killed in the rooms where Rhaegar's own choices had left them undefended. Selmy does not look away from Rhaegar while he says it. He has decided that Rhaegar deserves to receive this plainly, and without the softening of careful phrasing, and that is how he delivers it. Rhaegar does not speak for a long time after that. Elia was 26 years old. She married a Targaryen prince and bore him 2 children, and was held in that city by Rhaegar's own father, while Rhaegar rode to war over a woman who was not her, chasing a prophecy she had never agreed to be part of. He never told her about the annulment, the High Septon, and a heart tree in Dorne and Septon Maynard's quiet record, and Elia was simply never told. She died as his wife in name. She died because of the tourney at Harrenhal, where Rhaegar placed a crown of winter roses in Lyanna Stark's lap in front of the whole realm, and lit the fuse that eventually burned King's Landing to ash. She died because of the choices that followed that moment, each one flowing from the last. And Aegon. He was barely a year old. He was the boy Rhaegar had come to believe was the prince that was promised, the child he had convinced himself would fulfill the prophecy he had spent his life chasing. The dragon must have 3 heads. He had bent the realm's fate around that belief. He had made choices that cost Lyanna's father and brother their lives, that cost the realm years of war, that put Robert Baratheon's warhammer on a collision course with Rhaegar's chest. All of it in service of a prophecy whose subject is now dead in a room in King's Landing, killed by a man who was given access to that room because Rhaegar's own father trusted the wrong Lannister. Outside the tent, something falls over with a metallic clang. No one reacts. The camp has the flat quiet of a place where everyone is very tired. Selmy gives him time. The afternoon moves toward evening. When Rhaegar speaks again, his voice is level. Robert will be crowned. Within the month, nothing left to stop it. And if they find me... Selmy does not flinch. You will not be alive long after that, nor will anyone found with you. Rhaegar nods once. He is not thinking about the throne. There is no throne, not for him, not in any world that proceeds from this camp in this Riverlands field with this broken army around him. He is a man with cracked ribs and no house left, and the news of 3 deaths sitting in him like iron in water. But there is one thing he does not have an answer to yet, and it will not leave him alone the way everything else does. Lyanna. She is at the Tower of Joy, in the Red Mountains of Dawn, the place he chose for her before the Trident. Arthur Dane is there, Gerald Hightower, Oswell Went. 3 of the finest knights he has ever known, given one task. She was far along with child when he left. He does not know if the child has been born. He does not know if either of them survived. He does not know what 3 knights bound by a dead king's orders will do now that the war is lost. He cannot send a raven signed with his name. He cannot ride. He can barely sit up without Selmy's arm. Whatever news there is from the tower will reach him slowly along roads that do not announce who he is, and he will have to wait for it. He closes his eyes. The tent is quiet. A fire catches somewhere outside, the dry snap of it, and then settles into a low burn. He lies in the dark and thinks about a tower in the mountains, about whether the thing he left there has survived what he set in motion, about what he will do, if it has. Ned Stark rides south from the Trident with 6 men, and a question that has had no comfortable answer since the moment he learned where Lyanna was. He has not told the 6 what they are riding toward. He has not had to. Men who follow Ned Stark understand that silence about a destination usually means the destination is worth dreading. The Red Mountains of Dawn are red in the way old blood is red, a deep rust color that the light does not improve. The road into them is barely a road, climbing and doubling back through passes that seem to take a personal interest in discouraging passage. Howland Reed rides at Ned's right hand, compact and quiet, with eyes that miss nothing without appearing to look at anything. They have ridden for days. There is not much to say that is not already said by the direction they are moving. Ned has known, since the moment Robert first told him about Lyanna's disappearance, roughly what would be at the end of this. A crown prince. A secret. A woman kept in a tower in the mountains, while her father and her brother burned in King's Landing for the asking of a question Rhaegar chose not to answer. The further south they ride, the more precisely it takes shape, and none of the shapes are easy to hold. The Tower of Joy is a single spire of grey stone in a narrow valley between 2 red peaks, not grand, not fortified in any significant way, chosen for concealment. At its foot stand 3 men in white cloaks, and they do not move when they see Ned coming. Ned recognizes them all. Sir Arthur Dane he would know anywhere. The Sword of the Morning. He carries Dawn at his hip, the pale great sword of House Dane, forged from the metal of a fallen star, and everything about how he stands near it communicates that he knows exactly what he has and what he can do with it. Ned's father once said, with no particular embellishment, that Arthur Dane was the finest knight who had ever lived. His father chose his words carefully. Beside Dane stands Gerald Hightower, the White Bull, Lord Commander of the King's Guard, old in a way that means durable, not diminished, and Oswell Went, the 3rd of them, easy and still. Ned pulls his horse up, his 6 companions spread at his back. The war is over, he says. Rhaegar fell at the Trident. The king is dead. There is no cause left to guard here. Stand aside. Hightower looks at him without any change in expression. The King's Guard does not flee. I am not asking you to flee. We have a charge in this tower, Hightower says. Our orders stand until we are relieved of them. We are not standing aside. Your king is dead. The prince who gave the order is dead. Our orders stand, Hightower says. Come and move us if you mean to. Ned has no answer that will alter any of that. Hightower does not expect one. The conversation has been a formality, and they both know it, and now the formality is done. The fight is the worst thing Ned Stark has ever been through, and he is not on the losing end of it. Arthur Dayne with Dawn is beyond anything Ned has a reference for. He has been in battles. He has been in individual fights that he thought were difficult. He has never faced anything like this, where every strike is the precise strike needed and nothing wasted, and Dawn makes a geometry around Dayne that men simply cannot enter safely and survive. 2 of Ned's 6 go down in the first exchange. Ned is driven back twice, alive only because there are still men coming up behind him from different angles. Gerald Hightower moves slower than Dayne and hits harder than anything should, absorbing a wound across his arm without the wound appearing to register as information he needs to act on. He puts down 1 more of Ned's men with a single stroke. Oswell Went holds 2 of Ned's remaining companions on the left flank and gives ground only very slowly. What ends it is Howland Reed. He has spent the fight moving into position with the patience of a man who knows that the right moment is not the first moment, and is not the moment you feel ready, but the one single moment when your opponent has forgotten you are there. Dayne is extraordinary. Dayne also, at one instant in the fight, turns the wrong way for 1/2 second. Howland Reed does not let it pass. When the fighting stops, all 3 Kingsguard are dead. Of the 7 who rode south from the Trident, 2 are standing. Ned Stark, Howland Reed. 5 men lie in the red dust at the base of the tower, and Ned will carry their names out of this valley in the way he carries every name of every man who followed him, somewhere he did not come back from, which is permanently and without putting it down. He goes into the tower. Lyanna is in a room at the top, and there is too much blood in it. It has soaked through the bed and into the floor, and it tells Ned, before anything else, everything he needs to know about how little time there is. She is awake. Her face has the color taken out of it. In her arms, wrapped in cloth that was something else before this night, is the smallest person Ned has ever seen. The infant is alive, dark-haired, looking at nothing in particular with unfocused newborn eyes. Ned crosses the room. "Ned." Her voice is nearly gone. "You have to take him. I'm here. I've got him. Robert will not let him live. If he knows what he is." She looks at the child, and then back at Ned. "He is Rhaegar's son. They were married, Ned. Before a heart tree. He is legitimate. Promise me you will hide him. Promise me Robert will not know. I promise. Promise me, Ned. I promise you. I'm here. I promise." She pulls him close and speaks directly into his ear. Barely more than breath. The child's true name, Aegon. Rhaegar Targaryen. Then she lets go, and Ned is the only one left in the room who is breathing. He holds the infant for a time. Howland Reed stands in the doorway and says nothing. The decision is not difficult, which is the only mercy the room offers. The child's name is Rhaegar Targaryen, and Ned is going to bury it, not because Lyanna was wrong to give it, but because Robert Baratheon is about to be crowned king, and the only thing that keeps this child alive is the gap between what Robert knows and what he does not. The child will be Jon Snow. The bastard name of the North is Snow, and that is what Ned will carry home, because the realm only knows what Ned tells it, and Ned has just made a promise in this room. Howland Reed asks nothing. It is one of his qualities. Before they leave Dorne, Ned rides to Starfall. He brings Dorne with him and returns it to the House of Dayne. Arthur Dayne died at his post doing his duty, which is the most Arthur Dayne manner of death there could be. The sword is not Ned's to keep. He delivers it and does not stay, because there is a child in his arms and a long road north. Months after the Trident, Rhaegar is in the attic room of a farmhouse at the eastern edge of the Riverlands, hosted by a man who does not ask questions and has been paid not to start. The Riverlands are the most fought-over territory in the realm, and they show it in every direction. Burned granaries, collapsed bridges, men who used to belong to armies moving through the roads without purpose, carrying their weapons out of habit now that the war is over. A silver-haired stranger with his hood pulled forward is not remarkable among all of that, provided he is careful, and Rhaegar has become very careful. The black armor of the Ruby Ford is gone. He left it in pieces near the river within days of the battle, pulling off each section in the dark and pushing it into the mud, because Targaryen black plate is not a thing a man wears if he wants to remain unknown. Even stripped of the ruby breastplate, the armor would mark him, the style of it, the quality, the particular way the shoulder guards are shaped. He is dressed in plain wool now, the kind of thing a merchant's clerk wears, which is the story he has been telling. The silver-gold hair he cannot change. He keeps it short as he can stand it, and it is still silver-gold, still unmistakably what it is, which is the one color produced by only one bloodline in living memory. And his eyes are dark indigo in the particular way that Targaryen eyes have always been dark indigo, and no amount of keeping them down changes their color when someone does look. So he keeps to smaller roads. He keeps his hood forward. He keeps moving only when he must and keeps still when he can. What he does with the stillness, mostly, is catalogue the dead. Elia Martell is first, every time. She was 26 years old. She had been kind to him, genuinely kind, which was not something he had earned in the latter years of their marriage when his attention had gone elsewhere, and she had understood what that meant without forcing him to say it plainly. She bore him 2 children. She was left in King's Landing when he rode to war, held in those rooms by Aerys as much as by circumstance, and she died in them. She was never told about the annulment. He had told himself at the time that this was a mercy, that telling her would cause pain without benefit. He knows now it was cowardice dressed in the vocabulary of consideration. She died as his wife in name. She died because of a tourney at Harrenhal and a crown of winter roses and a chain of choices that Rhaegar made and could have made differently at any point along the way. Rhaenys, his daughter. She was 3 years old. She had a grey cat named Balerion, after the great dragon, which she found amusing in the way that small children find enormous things amusing, and she used to fall asleep in the great hall when she was supposed to be in bed. He does not permit himself to think in detail about what Gregor Clegane found her doing when Maegor's holdfast fell. He thinks about the grey cat instead, which is easier and does not let himself stay on the thought of Rhaenys long enough to feel its full weight, because he has learned that there are some weights he cannot afford to feel all at once if he intends to go on moving. Aegon, his son by Elia, an infant, barely a year old. The boy Rhaegar had come to believe was the prince that was promised, Azor Ahai, reborn, the center of the prophecy he had spent years chasing through dusty books in the citadel and every midnight passage of the ancient texts he could find. The dragon must have 3 heads. He had reorganized the trajectory of his entire family's fate around that conviction. Aegon died in the same city where Rhaegar's own father had stockpiled wildfire in the passages beneath the streets against the day he decided to burn everything rather than surrender it. The prophecy is not the cruelest part of that. The cruelest part is the arithmetic. Aerys too is dead. His father, mad for years, mad in ways that had been worsening since the defiance of Duskendale, mad in ways Rhaegar had seen and told himself he would address when the moment was right. The moment was never right, and Aerys burned people alive in the throne room, and Jaime Lannister killed him before the rebel lords arrived, whether that was mercy or opportunism, or the act of a young man who looked at a king ordering the incineration of a city and decided that an oath to a madman had limits, Rhaegar has considered all three possibilities and no longer has strong feelings about which. The dynasty that remains is Viserys, 7 years old, evacuated to Dragonstone with whatever household Rhaella managed to hold together, and Rhaegar himself in an attic, healing. 3 months after the Trident, Rhaegar begins to hear things about the Tower of Joy. It comes in fragments. Merchants on the river routes carry information as freely as cargo. More freely, because information weighs nothing and can be traded repeatedly without diminishing. Soldiers who used to follow banners on both sides are wandering home and they talk. What Rhaegar hears, piecing together pieces over weeks, is this. The King's Guard, stationed at the Tower of Joy in the Red Mountains of Dawn, are dead. All 3 of them. Arthur Dayne, Gerald Hightower, Oswell Went. A party of Northmen fought them. The Northmen were led by Ned Stark, the Stark boy, one of Robert Baratheon's commanders at the Trident. Most of Stark's party did not survive the fight, but Ned Stark himself survived, and he rode north. Rhaegar sets the fragments against what he knows. Lyanna was in that tower. He placed her there himself, in the months before the Trident, with 3 of the finest knights he had ever known, standing at the foot of it for exactly one reason: to ensure that she and the child she was carrying came to no harm while he was away at war. She was far along when he left her, close to her time. He had told himself he would be back before the birth. The war would end, the Trident would be decisive one way or another, and he would return to the tower in the Red Mountains to whatever had arrived in his absence. He was not back before the birth. He was in a river fighting Robert Baratheon. He does not know if Lyanna survived. He does not know if the child was born alive. He does not know what Ned Stark found at the top of those stairs, and what Ned Stark chose to do with whatever was there. But the fragments align in a way he cannot ignore. Ned Stark rode north. The timing matches. A Lord of Winterfell would not ride south to fight 3 of the realm's finest Kingsguard to the death and then return to his seat with nothing. Rhaegar cannot ask anyone directly. He cannot approach any rebel lord or court official of the new regime. He cannot send a raven with his true name attached. He is, in practical terms, dead. The rubies of the Ruby Ford are his memorial, and most of the realm is satisfied with that. And the fiction is the only thing keeping him alive. Any action that confirms he is breathing ends the fiction and ends Rhaegar with it. But the question is in the room with him now, taking up the space that grief does not already occupy. If the child was born, and Ned took it north, then somewhere in Winterfell or on the road to Winterfell, there is a person who is part Lyanna Stark and part Rhaegar Targaryen, and that person is being kept alive. And Rhaegar does not have a name for what he is in relation to such a fact. He does have a word. It is father. He has simply never had occasion to mean it, and meaning it now, in an attic in the Riverlands, is the strangest thing he has done since the river closed over his face at the Ruby Ford, and he did not die. He pulls the hood lower and sits with the question. It will not release him. He has the strong suspicion he is not going to let it. The road north from Dawn is long in the best conditions, and the conditions in 283 AC are not the best. The riverlands that Ned has to cross are the most fought-over territory in the realm, and they show it. Burned granaries, collapsed bridges, fields stripped for fodder and left empty, men walking in 1s and 2s with no particular direction, soldiers on both sides who survived the war and are making their separate ways toward wherever home used to be before the banners above it changed. Ned rides through all of it with an infant wrapped in cloth against his chest. He stops explaining the child to people he meets on the road. In the early days of the journey, he found himself beginning to say things that did not need to be said, and he stopped. He is a young lord of the north returning home. The child is his. These are both true. No one in the Riverlands in 283 AC has the energy to look hard at a man with a baby, and Ned is grateful for that in the way a man is grateful for small mercies when the large ones are not available. Jon sleeps most of the journey, which is one kind of relief. He is dark-haired and very small, and his eyes, when they open, are the unfocused deep blue of all newborns before they settle into whatever color they will be. He does not know his name. He does not know either of his names. He is 2 weeks old and moving north through a ruined war road in the arms of a man who has made a promise he is only beginning to understand the weight of, and he sleeps through most of it. Howland Reed meets Ned at the southern edge of the neck. They have said very little to each other since the tower, in the way of men who have been through something that does not require narration, because they were both there. The Crannog man has a quality of stillness that comes from living in an environment where patience is survival, and noise is a thing you do at risk to yourself. He rides alongside Ned for the last stretch of the Riverlands without speaking, and when the landscape begins to change, when the road starts to thin into the margins of the vast fog-wrapped wetlands that guard the north, he stops his horse. Ned stops his horse. They are the only two living people who know the full truth of what happened at the Tower of Joy. They will continue to be the only two for as long as both of them choose to be, which is a choice they have already made without discussing it, because some decisions do not require discussion. Howland Reed looks at Ned. Ned looks at Howland Reed. The child is asleep between them, in the sense that a sleeping child is always the center of any room it is in. Howland Reed nods. Ned nods back. The Crannog man turns his horse east into the neck's interior, toward Greywater Watch. He does not look back. The wetlands close around him, the way the neck closes around everything it accepts, which is quietly and without ceremony. Ned watches until there is nothing to watch, and then he continues north, alone with the child and the secret. Winterfell comes into view over the tree line on a grey afternoon, its towers announcing themselves before anything else, faint steam rising from the hot springs that warm the castle's stone even in cold weather. It is an ancient place, and it has the quality of ancient places, which is a kind of indifference to whatever arrives at its gates, because it has seen enough arrivals to have stopped finding them remarkable. Ned has been away for 2 years. He comes home on a tired horse with a baby and 6 men fewer than he left with, and Winterfell receives him the way it receives everything, which is to say, it simply stands there, and he comes inside. Catelyn meets him in the yard. She is a Tully of Riverrun by blood, and a Stark of Winterfell by a marriage completed not long before the war ended, which means she has been the lady of a strange castle for less than a year, and has managed it with the competence she brings to everything she decides to manage well. She comes into the yard, and she sees Ned, and she sees the cloth bundle in his arms, and she does what Catelyn does with things she has not been prepared for, which is to hold her face very still. "He is my blood," Ned says. "His mother is gone. He will be raised here." There is no mother's name in what Ned says, and Catelyn hears the absence clearly. She is not being told a lie, exactly. She is being told the absolute minimum of what is true and invited to draw no further conclusions. An infant. No mother named. The war is over, and her husband has come home, and this is what he has brought. He will need a wet nurse, she says. I will arrange it. She goes back into the keep to arrange it. The coldness that settles in her toward this child is not the coldness of a cruel woman. It is the coldness of a woman who has been handed a silence, where an explanation should be and made to carry it without being told what is inside. She will be a devoted mother to the children she and Ned will have together. Toward this infant, the shape of that unanswered question will always be there, and the shape will always be cold. Ned takes Jon to the Godswood. Winterfell's Godswood is ancient in the particular way that northern Godswoods are ancient, which has nothing to do with the stones or the arrangement of the trees and everything to do with the feeling of the place, which is that things said here are said to something that is listening. A full acre of old growth, close and dark, the air heavier inside than outside in the way that certain silences are heavier than others. At its center stands the heart tree, a great weirwood of bone-white bark with a face carved into it, the carved mouth open in an expression that has been read as grief or warning or witness for longer than anyone can say. Ned has been here before. He was here when he was a boy, and he was here the night before he left for the war, and he will be here many times again. This is the first time he comes to it with something he cannot set down. He stands before the weirwood. The red eyes look at him. He does not pray in any formal way. The old gods are not that kind of god, and Ned is not that kind of man. But he stands in front of what is watching, and he says what is true, because that is what this place is for. His name is Rhaegar Targaryen, Ned says. His voice is quiet, but it does not waver. His mother was Lyanna Stark. She died in the tower with his name on her lips and a promise around her dying breath. He looks at the child's sleeping face, at the dark hair, and the features still too new to read clearly. His father was Rhaegar Targaryen. The ruby ford may have him, or it may not. I don't know what became of him when the river closed over his face and the rubies went into the water. But the boy is here. The boy is real. He stands for a time. The weirwood watches with its carved red eyes. He is Jon Snow now, Ned says. Bastard name of the North. That is what I can give him and keep him breathing at the same time. That is what this promise costs. He turns and carries the child back toward the light at the edge of the Godswood. You heard the first promise. Now you've heard the name. That makes two things between us. He walks out of the Godswood into the grey Winterfell afternoon. Around him, the castle is going about its work. Fires being lit, tables being set, the ordinary business of a great household at the end of a long day. A bastard has come to live in Winterfell. His name is Jon Snow. That is what the household will be told, and that is what the household will believe. Because what else would they believe? And the truth is not their weight to carry. Ned carries the child inside. Jon Snow opens his dark eyes and looks at Winterfell for the first time, and sees nothing in particular, and does not know what he is seeing. Several months after the Trident, Rhaegar is moving again. The ribs have knitted well enough to sustain a full day on horseback without the kind of pain that makes riding dangerous. He has moved through 3 different hiding places since the farmhouse at the Riverland's eastern edge, each one smaller and less obvious than the last. He moves when the risk of staying outweighs the risk of going, which is a calculation he performs with the same care he once gave to military planning, which is to say, methodically and without sentiment. His silver-gold hair he has tried to conceal by binding it close to his head beneath a wool cap. It works until it does not. His dark indigo eyes he cannot do anything about. So he keeps to the roads that merchant trains avoid, and he listens. Listening has become his principal activity. He listens at wayside inns and at the edges of markets, and at the campfires of wandering soldiers who will sit with any stranger who brings something to eat. He is assembling a picture, piece by piece, the way he once assembled music by ear, testing each fragment against what the whole should sound like, setting aside what does not fit and carrying forward what does. What he is looking for is news from the Tower of Joy. The first piece comes through a chain of 4 people, none of whom know what they are carrying. A river trader had it from a knight who had it from a man who was on the rebel side at the Trident. The Tower of Joy stands empty. The 3 Kingsguard who held it are dead, killed by a party of Northmen who took heavy losses in the fight. The name attached to the northern party in every version of the story Rhaegar hears is Ned Stark, Lord of Winterfell, one of Robert Baratheon's commanders at the Ruby Ford. Ned Stark survived. His men mostly did not. He rode north afterward. The second piece is slower to arrive and comes from a different direction. A merchant who trades with the river people of the Neck, the crannogmen who know every waterway and the vast wetlands that divide Westeros down its middle, has heard from people in those wetlands that the Lord of Winterfell returned to his seat from the south with an infant. He calls it his bastard. He offers no mother's name to anyone who asks. Rhaegar finds a cold, empty outbuilding at the edge of a village off the main road, and sits with these 2 pieces in the quiet for a long time. The arithmetic is not complicated. He performs it anyway, slowly, the way he has always worked through things that matter to him, with full attention and no skipped steps. Lyanna was at the Tower of Joy. She was with child when he last saw her, far along and close to her time. He had placed the 3 finest knights he knew at that tower for exactly one purpose. Ned Stark went to the tower, fought those 3 knights at great cost to his own party, and then rode north and arrived at Winterfell carrying an infant of unnamed parentage. The timing aligns. The direction aligns. Lyanna does not appear in any version of these fragments as a person who left the tower alive. The tower is described as empty or as holding its dead, and Ned Stark is the one who went in and came out carrying what he carried. The child is alive. Ned took the child north. The timing matches. Rhaegar sits with the shape of what the evidence makes. His son is alive in Winterfell, born of his marriage to Lyanna before a heart tree in Dorne, a ceremony that Septon Maynard witnessed, and whose record sits somewhere in the citadel, a ceremony that makes the child legitimate by every law that once governed this kingdom. The child breathes and is fed and is called Snow, which is the bastard name of the North, and the man who gave him that name gave him the only name that keeps a Targaryen child alive in the kingdom Robert Baratheon is about to govern. Rhaegar understands this. He does not argue with it. He simply holds the fact, which is alive in Winterfell, called Snow. And then his mind does what it has always done in moments of consequence. It reaches for the prophecy. He notices it doing this the way he might notice a hand reaching for a familiar instrument, doing it without decision before the thinking part of him has weighed in. The 3rd head of the dragon, born of ice and fire. Rhaegar's line to Lyanna was Targaryen blood meeting Stark blood, which is to say fire meeting the cold of the north, and the child born of it is exactly what the oldest texts described when they spoke of what Azor Ahai reborn would be. He has read those passages more times than he could count. He knows where the logic goes if he lets it. He stops himself. He stops himself because he has stood exactly here before. He stood here and concluded that he himself was the prince that was promised, the figure at the center of the prophecy he had spent years chasing through old texts and borrowed candles in the small hours of the night. He restructured the choices of his life around that conclusion. Then he stood here again and concluded that Aegon, his son by Elia, was the true subject of the prophecy. He bent the trajectories of other people's lives around that conclusion as well. Aegon is dead. Elia is dead. Rhaenys is dead. Lyanna is dead. Every person the prophecy touched is dead or small and frightened on an island, waiting to see what the world will allow them to have. Rhaegar is in a cold shed in the Riverlands, which is what becoming the center of a prophecy has produced. He is not going to place that weight on a child who has been alive for a few months and who called snow because the alternative is a sword. He sets the prophecy aside. Not with drama, not with a speech. He sets it aside the way a man sets aside a tool that has broken everything he tried to use it to build. He does not reach for it again. Then he asks himself what is left if it is not prophecy. The answer requires no effort at all. The answer is the simplest thing he has thought in a long time. The boy is his son. Lyanna died, bringing him into the world, and spoke his name with her last breath, and Ned Stark made a promise over her body to protect him. The boy is alive because people who loved Lyanna found a way to make him so. Rhaegar didn't make him so. Rhaegar was at the Ruby Ford when his son was born. Rhaegar has been in hiding since while other people kept the child breathing. None of that changes what the child is in relation to him. The child is his son, and his son has never had a father, and those two facts together are the entire reason. There is no prophecy in that sentence. There is only what it says. Rhaegar decides he will travel north, not to reclaim a throne that no longer belongs to his family and that he has no means to reclaim. Not to announce himself or contact rebel lords or send ravens with his true name on them. Not to declare the child's legitimacy to the world, which would be the same as drawing a target on the boy and handing the bow to Robert Baratheon. He has nothing to claim, and he knows it, and he is not going to claim anything. He will find the child that Lyanna Stark died to put into the world. He will see him. He will know what the boy looks like, and what kind of person is growing in Winterfell's cold rooms. That is all Rhaegar is permitting himself to want, because it is the only thing he can want without it also being a catastrophe. He pulls the wool cap down over his silver-gold hair and steps out of the outbuilding into the early dark. The road north is a problem he will need to solve carefully, which means it is a problem he knows how to approach. He has always been good at careful things. He has been less good over the years at knowing what he was being careful toward. For the first time since the Trident, he knows exactly what he is walking toward. That is something. He starts north. The problem, stated plainly, is this. To reach Winterfell, Rhaegar must cross the length of Robert Baratheon's kingdom. Not a portion of it. The full length. From where he is in the Riverlands to the deep north is hundreds of leagues of road and river and settled territory. Every mile of it part of a realm currently organized around the question of whether any surviving Targaryen presents enough of a threat to be worth finding. The answer to that question, were it ever posed about Rhaegar specifically, would not require much deliberation. He is the crown prince of a dynasty that no longer exists. The man who sits the throne he once stood to inherit has personal reasons for wanting him dead that go beyond politics. If Rhaegar is recognized anywhere on the road north, he dies. And his death will confirm that he was alive, and his being alive will require explanation, and the explanation will involve Lyanna Stark and the Tower of Joy, and the child in Winterfell. So the problem is not only his life, the problem is what his death reveals. He thinks about this carefully, and for a long time. The disguise that served him in the Riverlands was adequate for a landscape full of wreckage and displaced people, where one more hooded man on a side road attracts no notice. It will not be adequate for a journey of hundreds of leagues through increasingly settled territory, with checkpoints and courts and people who remember faces from before the war. He needs something more durable than a hood. Rhaegar cuts his hair. He has worn it long since he can remember, the silver gold falling to his shoulders, and it has always been the single most identifiable thing about him to anyone who ever saw him at court or tourney. He cuts it himself with a knife, as short as he can manage, and the silver gold falls to the floor of the cold outbuilding in lengths and lies there like evidence of something. He sweeps it out and burns it in the small fire he is permitted to keep at night. He does not watch it burn. The hair is shorter now. It is still silver gold, which is to say it is still the hair of a Targaryen, and there is not much he can do about that, beyond keeping it covered. His dark indigo eyes he cannot address at all. They are what they are, which is the color produced by only one bloodline in living memory. Without the black plate armor, he is a tall man in rough merchant's wool, a description that fits a large number of people on any road in Westeros. He trains himself out of the way he usually moves and holds himself, which is the posture of a man raised to believe he would eventually be king, and which is recognizable to anyone who has spent time around power. He works at this the way he works at a difficult passage of music, with repetition and patience, and no expectation that it will be perfect, only serviceable. He thinks about who he owes this to. Lyanna is first. She died in a room at the top of a tower in the Red Mountains of Dawn because Rhaegar was at the Ruby Ford fighting a battle his side was losing. And whatever else is true about any of it, that is the fact he cannot root around or reframe. She went into that tower because he put her there, and she came out of it in the only way a woman comes out of that kind of room after that kind of birth with no real help available, which is carried. He owes it to her to at least look at what she spent her life on. Jon is second. The child is alive in Winterfell as a bastard called Snow, with no knowledge of anything about himself beyond what Ned Stark has decided to tell him. He is a year old, perhaps more. He has never been looked at by his father. Rhaegar has long, elegant fingers that everyone who ever heard him play said were made for a harp, and those fingers have never touched his son. That is a particular category of debt that he does not have a precise word for. Aelia. He will not pretend this journey is for Aelia. She was wronged by him in ways he cannot now repair, and the specific quality of the wrong was that he chose other things above her and the children she bore him, and never told her plainly what he was doing or why. He will not construct a story in which this journey is payment toward that debt, because it is not. What he can do is refuse to compound it. He chose Lyanna's son over Elaya's children when he set all of this in motion. He will not also abandon the child he chose her children for. None of this makes the route safer. It only makes the journey necessary. He considers the roads. The King's Road is not possible. It is the primary artery of the realm, running from King's Landing through every major settlement to the north, carrying more traffic and more soldiers and more people who attended enough tourneys and court functions to recognize a Targaryen's face than any other road in Westeros. To travel the King's Road is to be seen by the maximum number of people with the maximum amount of context for who they are looking at. He would not last 2 weeks on it. He needs a route that avoids main roads, avoids major castles, and avoids the concentration of people who knew him before the war. There is one route that satisfies all of these constraints. It goes through the neck. The neck is the vast stretch of wetlands and bog that runs across the middle of Westeros, dividing the north from the south, fog-wrapped and treacherous to anyone who does not know its channels. Its only land crossing is guarded by the ruins of Moat Cailin, a fortress that has never been taken from the northern approach. The Crannogmen live in the neck, the small river people of the marshes who know every path and every drowning bog in the wetlands, and who do not permit outsiders to pass through without their knowledge. No one travels through the neck without the Crannogmen knowing about it. That is both the advantage of the route and its complication, because the Crannogmen know what happened at the Tower of Joy. The Lord of Greywater Watch, the Crannogman seat in the middle of the neck's interior, was there. Howland Reed rode south with Ned Stark and survived the fight with the Kingsguard alongside him, and came home knowing the full truth of what Jon Snow is and who his parents were. He is the only person alive besides Ned Stark who has that knowledge. His loyalty is to Ned Stark. His conscience is his own, and Rhaegar does not know what his conscience says about a Targaryen prince walking into his territory on the way to Ned's front door. To pass through the neck, Rhaegar will have to deal with Howland Reed. He does not know how that conversation ends. He does not know whether Howland Reed will see him as a complication to be removed or a truth to be handled. He does not know whether the Crannogman's loyalty to Ned outweighs whatever he might feel about what was owed to Lyanna. He is walking toward a man who watched Lyanna die and who knew whose child was in the tower. The only alternative to that conversation is the King's Road, which is a different and more certain kind of death. Rhaegar sets out toward the neck. He is, by most accounts that have ever been given of him, a musician and a scholar, and a deeply melancholic man who spent his adult life in pursuit of the shape he believed history had made for him. All of that is still true, but it has been joined, in the months since the Ruby Ford, by something he has no practice at and did not expect to become: a father. He has never done a single thing in his life as a father. He does not know if this journey is too late or not enough or entirely wrong. He goes anyway, because the only other thing available to him is to stop, and he has already decided that stopping is not what he is going to do. The neck announces itself before it arrives. The road south of it narrows gradually, and then more quickly as the land flattens and softens, solid ground giving way to patches of marsh and standing water, the trees changing from the ordinary forest of the riverlands to something older and lower and stranger. The air takes on a stillness that has nothing restful about it. By the time Rhaegar reaches the proper edge of the wetlands, the road has become a raised causeway over black water, and the causeway has gaps in it that require attention to cross safely, and the water on both sides has no visible bottom. In the distance, half dissolved by the fog that sits over the neck's surface like permanent weather, the ruins of Moat Cailin stand at the only land crossing into the north. The towers have been broken for a long time. They are not manned in any conventional sense. The Crannogmen who govern this territory do not garrison walls. They do not need to. Rhaegar becomes aware of the reed boats sometime in the late morning of his first full day in the wetlands. They hold their distance. He hears them before he sees them, a soft displacement of water in the reeds to his left, then a similar sound to his right, the particular quiet of men who do not make noise as a matter of practice and upbringing. He does not turn to look. He does not change his pace. He continues along the causeway road with the grey water on both sides, and the grey sky close overhead, and the settled understanding that every step he takes in this place is being observed, has been observed, will continue to be observed for however long it takes. The man appears in his path when Rhaegar next looks forward along the causeway. He did not see him arrive. The Crannog man is small and still, dressed in earth-colored clothing that does not announce itself, with the quality of belonging to the landscape rather than merely standing in it. He has no visible weapons. He has no visible authority, which in the neck means nothing, because authority in the neck is not demonstrated through visible means. It is demonstrated through the fact that you are here, and the man approaching you has just understood that you have been here the entire time. Rhaegar stops walking. Howland Reed looks at him. His eyes move over Rhaegar's face in the way of a person confirming a thing already suspected, rather than discovering something new. "I know who you are," he says. Rhaegar does not deny it. He has been careful with his hair and his posture and his manner of dress for weeks of travel, and all of it is useless here, in this place, in front of this specific man. "I know you do," Rhaegar says. "You were at the tower." "I was at the tower." They stand on the causeway in the fog. The reed boats wait somewhere in the grey water around them. The neck holds its silence. "Tell me what you saw," Rhaegar says. "I have assembled pieces of it from other people at other distances. I want to hear it from someone who was in the room," Howland Reed tells him. "Lyanna was alive when they entered the tower. She was in the room at the top, in the bed where she had delivered the child, and she was dying. There was blood. She held the infant, and she gave Ned her last words, and then she was gone. The child survived. Ned wrapped the child and came down from the tower with him and rode north, and that was what the tower had left to give anyone." Rhaegar listens to all of this without speaking. He already knew the shape of it. He had assembled the outline from rumor and calculation across months of careful listening on minor roads. He knew the facts in the way a man knows facts he has never witnessed. But there is a difference between knowing the outline of a thing and hearing it spoken by a man who was standing in the room where it happened, and the difference is located below thinking, in the part of a person that does not process events as information, but simply receives them as weight. The weight arrives now in full. She died in a room at the top of a tower in the mountains of Dawn, with a newborn in her arms, and Ned Stark standing over her, and 3 dead Kingsguard in the dust outside. She died there because Rhaegar was at the Ruby Ford. He has known this for months. The knowing doesn't get lighter with repetition. "The child," Rhaegar says, "is in Winterfell, called Jon Snow, Ned's bastard by the story Ned tells. And what does he look like?" Howland Reed considers this. "Dark hair, grey eyes. He looks like a Stark." Rhaegar nods. He is not surprised. The North runs strong in people who carry it. He had not expected otherwise. Howland Reed watches him for a moment without speaking. The Crannog man's expression is not hostile, and it is not warm. It is the expression of a man working through a calculation in front of the variable the calculation concerns. "You're going to ask me to let you pass," Howland Reed says. "I am." "To what end?" "To see him. Once. Under whatever conditions Ned Stark will accept. I am not traveling to Winterfell to reclaim anything. I have nothing to reclaim. I am going because the boy is my son, and I have never seen him, and I would like to see him at least once before I decide what the rest of my life is for." Howland Reed is quiet for a time. The reed boats hold their position in the water, their occupants waiting with the patience of people for whom waiting is not a hardship. Howland Reed's loyalty belongs to Ned Stark. This is not something Rhaegar misunderstands or argues with. Whatever Howland decides here on the causeway, he will decide it with Ned at the center of his thinking, and Rhaegar knows this, and waits. The question is what Ned's interests actually are in this situation. Howland Reed thinks it through. A Rhaegar who is turned back leaves the neck still determined, carrying the same intention north by some other route or through some less controllable sequence of events. The alternative to the neck is the King's Road, and the King's Road is full of soldiers and townspeople and former courtiers who attended enough tourneys to recognize a Targaryen face. If Rhaegar is recognized on the King's Road, the consequences spread fast and wide and touch everything, including the child in Winterfell. And if Rhaegar dies on the road without reaching Ned, he dies having told no one, bound by nothing, his existence and his knowledge unresolved, which protects nothing and binds no one to silence. A Rhaegar who continues north, with Ned warned ahead of his arrival, gives Ned a choice. Ned can decide how he receives this before it arrives at his door. That is something Ned has never had before in relation to this particular problem, and it is something Ned would never ask for, but might be grateful to have. "I will let you pass," Howland Reed says. "But a raven goes north before you do." Rhaegar understands what is being offered. Ned will know I am coming. Ned will know you are coming. He will have time to think before you arrive. He will decide what to do with you when you get there. That is the condition. "That is a fair condition," Rhaegar says. Howland Reed nods. He steps off the causeway path. The road north is open. The raven leaves that evening from somewhere in the neck's interior, flying north at the speed ravens fly, which is faster than any man on foot and faster than any horse on roads this narrow and wet. It carries what it needs to carry. That Rhaegar Targaryen is alive and is coming north, and will arrive at Winterfell's gate asking to be received. Rhaegar watches the bird go until the fog takes it, and then resumes walking. He is days behind it, at minimum. The neck closes around him, grey water and grey sky, and the reed boats trailing at a respectful distance behind, and to both sides. He has passed the point of turning back. He has passed the only person who might have stopped him, under terms he can live with. He walks north with nothing to carry but the reason he is walking, and the reason is the same as it has been since he stepped out of that outbuilding in the Riverlands and pointed himself toward the neck. The bird is ahead of him. Ned is ahead of him. The child is ahead of him. He walks. The year is approximately 285 AC, and Winterfell has settled back into the business of being a castle in peacetime. The war is 2 years gone. The roads through the Riverlands have been rebuilt to the extent that roads through fought-over territory get rebuilt, which is to say, partially, and with evidence of what was there before still visible if you know where to look. Robert Baratheon was crowned king in King's Landing and is ruling somewhere below the neck, and that is not Ned's concern. Ned's concern is the north, and the north is large and cold and requires the full attention of its lord, and Ned gives it that attention without complaint. Jon is 2 years old. He walks now in the deliberate, unsteady way of children who have recently discovered that walking is possible and haven't yet developed strong opinions about pace or direction. He has dark hair and grey eyes and a long face still soft with early childhood, and he is more interested in whatever he is currently looking at than in whatever he is supposed to be doing. He has been at Winterfell for 2 years, and the household has settled around his presence the way households settle around facts they are given and not asked to examine. He is the Lord's bastard. His mother is not spoken of. This is how it is. The raven arrives on a morning in late autumn. Ned reads it 3 times before he sets it on the table. The message is short, the way Howland Reed's messages tend to be, because, Howland does not use words he does not need. He lives. He comes north. I have not stopped him. Ned sits with this for a long time. There is no raven he can send that will reach Rhaegar. Rhaegar is somewhere in the neck, which receives ravens only if the crannogmen choose to receive them, and Howland Reed has already made his decision. The message is not asking for instruction. It is an announcement that a thing is already in motion and that Ned will have to decide how he faces it. His first instinct is clear. Send men south. Find Rhaegar before he reaches Moat Kellyn. Turn him back. The promise Ned made to Lyanna was to protect Jon, and a surviving Targaryen prince making his way north with the obvious intention of finding the child is exactly the kind of threat that promise was made to prevent. If anyone in the realm ever establishes what Jon truly is, the boy stops being a child and becomes a claim, and a claim in Robert Baratheon's kingdom is something that men try to extinguish. The last thing Ned should do is allow the one man who can prove the claim to walk to his front gate. Ned sits with this plan and waits for it to feel right. It does not feel right. He makes himself work through why. Rhaegar is alive and coming north, regardless of what Ned wants. Howland Reed could have stopped him and chose instead to let him pass with conditions. Howland is not a fool, and Howland knows these waters better than anyone. And if there were a clean way to stop a determined man in the neck, Howland would have used it. The fact that Howland sent a warning raven instead of a refusal means that Howland looked at the situation and concluded that letting Rhaegar come, with Ned forewarned, was the least dangerous of the available options. Ned trusts that assessment even though he did not ask for it. But the deeper problem is what sending men actually produces. It produces a Rhaegar who has been turned away without agreement, who is still alive, who still knows about the child, who is now moving through the realm with no constraint and no reason to keep silent about anything. A man turned back without terms is a loose end, free to move and speak and act in whatever way seems best to him, with no obligation to anyone. He could approach other lords. He could make contact with loyalists who still dream of Targaryen restoration. He could be captured, and, in his capture, reveal everything he knows about the child in Winterfell. A Rhaegar who walks through Winterfell's gate under conditions Ned controls is a different thing entirely. A Rhaegar who leaves Winterfell with an understood silence between them is bound by something, not formally, but in the way that a man who has been given what he came for and has agreed to the terms of receiving it is bound. He has something to protect. He has reason to maintain the silence, because breaking it harms the thing he traveled north to find. The promise Ned made was to protect Jon, not to prevent the world from ever touching him, not to govern every consequence of his existence through the mechanism of one oath spoken over a dying woman in a tower in Dorne. To keep him safe, that is what Lyanna asked for. Ned knows the center of it, because he has been carrying it for 2 years, and he knows its shape the way you know the shape of something you carry every day. He goes to the Godswood. Winterfell's Godswood in late autumn is cold and dark in the specific way of northern Godswoods in that season, the canopy stripped to bare branches, the ground soft with fallen leaves gone black with wet. The heart tree stands at its center, as it has always stood, its bone-white bark catching what grey light there is, the carved face watching with its red eyes. Ned has come to this tree with promises to make and decisions to execute, and the occasional unbearable fact that needed to be stood in front of before it could be carried. He does not pray in any formal way. The old gods do not answer formal prayer. He comes here and stands still and lets the weirwood look at him until he knows what he has decided. He thinks about the Tower of Joy. He thinks about the 6 men who rode south with him, and the 3 who held the stairs, and what it cost to get to the room at the top. He thinks about what Lyanna said, the specific words of it, and what she was afraid of. She was afraid of Robert. She was afraid of what happened to Targaryen children in Robert Baratheon's Westeros. She was not asking Ned to keep the child hidden from his father. She was asking Ned to keep the child alive. Those are not the same request. They have not always felt different, but standing in front of the heart tree with the carved eyes on him, they feel different now. He walks back through the godswood into the yard. He will not send men to the neck. He will wait for Rhaegar to arrive, and he will meet him at the gate himself, and they will speak in private with no household present and no public acknowledgement of who the visitor is. He will hear Rhaegar out before he decides what to allow or refuse. The promise to Lyanna is honored by controlling the meeting, not by refusing it. A controlled meeting is safer for Jon than an unresolved Rhaegar loose in the realm. Jon is in the yard with a woman from the household, walking in his particular fashion toward nothing specific, his dark hair loose around his face, and his grey eyes moving from one thing to the next, with the attention that small children give to everything, because everything is still recent enough to be interesting. Ned crouches to the child's height. Jon looks at him. "Someone is coming to meet you," Ned says. "You will not remember it." Jon looks back at him, with the grey eyes that are the same colour as Ned's own eyes, as Lyanna's eyes, as every Stark who ever came out of the north, and says nothing because he is 2 years old and does not yet have the words for most things. Ned picks him up and holds him for a moment, warm and solid and heavier than he was last month, and then sets him back down on his feet. Jon immediately returns to the investigation he was conducting before the interruption. Ned goes inside to wait. The North has a quality that Rhaegar has heard described but never experienced. It is not just colder than the South, but differently cold. The cold a thing with substance and permanence, rather than the seasonal inconvenience that passes for winter in the Reach or the Riverlands. He has been cold for months on the road. Crossing through the neck into the North proper is a different register of it. The cold that lives in the stone of the roads and the black water of the rivers and the bark of every tree. The landscape is vast and grey-green and almost entirely indifferent to him, which he finds he does not mind. He has had enough of landscapes that were designed to mean something. Winterfell announces itself above the tree line on his 3rd morning in the north. 2 lines of grey walls, and above them grey towers, and from somewhere inside the walls a faint, permanent steam, rising where the hot springs that heat the castle warm the ground around it, even in this weather. The castle is large in the way that old things are large, not built for impression, but built to endure. Rhaegar has lived in Dragonstone and King's Landing, buildings constructed to declare what power looked like. Winterfell looks like it was constructed to outlast every argument about power that ever came near it. He approaches on foot. He has been on foot for most of the journey through the north, the roads too narrow and the territory too remote to make a horse worth the notice it draws. He is plainly dressed, his silver-gold hair as short as he keeps it now, his dark indigo eyes the one thing about him that has never submitted to any effort of concealment. He looks like what he has been for 2 years, a man who has come a long way for reasons he is not explaining. At the gate, he gives no name. He asks to see Lord Stark. The guards receive this with the particular skepticism that gate guards apply to travelers who arrive on foot without notice or introduction, and ask for the Lord by name, and Rhaegar waits while one of them goes to find someone with authority to deal with it. He does not wait long. Ned Stark comes to the gate himself. He does not look like a man who is surprised. He looks like a man who has been watching the road for several days and is now receiving the thing he has been watching for. He is young in a way that still catches Rhaegar slightly off guard, though Rhaegar knew the numbers. This is a man who was 20 years old at the Trident, who rode to the Tower of Joy at 20 years old, and made a promise at 20 years old, and has been keeping it alone since. He has grey eyes and a long northern face, and the careful expression of a man who has learned to think before he speaks. He looks at the silver-gold hair and the dark indigo eyes, and nods once. "Come inside," he says. They do not go through the great hall. Ned takes him through a passage that bypasses the household, up a stair, into a room with a table and 2 chairs and a fire laid. The door closes. They stand in the room with the fire between them. 2 men who were on opposite sides of the Ruby Ford 2 years ago, the same Ruby Ford from which one of them extracted the other, before the rebel riders could find the body they were looking for. Rhaegar looks at Ned Stark. Ned Stark looks at Rhaegar Targaryen. The weight in the room is specific. Not hostility. Not warmth. Something more like the weight of 2 men who each know things the other one also knows, and who have not yet established the terms of what they are going to do with that knowledge. Ned sets a pitcher and 2 cups on the table. He sits. He does not pour. Rhaegar takes the chair across from him and does not touch the wine. Not from suspicion, but from the old habit of not accepting anything in a room whose character he has not yet fully read. The silence that follows is its own kind of conversation. Ned could have had men in this room and in the passage outside it. He did not. Rhaegar could have arrived with something in his hands, a letter to a loyalist lord, some piece of leverage that raised the cost of refusal. He did not. They are both here exactly as they are, without anything behind them except the reasons they came. That parallel choice, made separately and arriving at the same conclusion, tells Rhaegar something about Ned Stark that the Trident couldn't tell him. The man across this table is dealing in the same currency Rhaegar is dealing in, which is the truth of the situation rather than the strongest position available. Rhaegar speaks. "I know what you promised her," he says. "I know why you made the promise. I am not here to break it." Ned looks at him steadily. "Then what are you here to do?" "I only want to see him." Ned is quiet. He has the quality of a man who says less than he is thinking, which is either caution or economy of speech, and in Ned's case, Rhaegar suspects it is both. He sits with Rhaegar's answer for a time that another man might have filled with immediate response. Then he says, "Tell me about the marriage." Rhaegar had not expected the directness of it. He understood that Ned had understood for some time, that whatever Lyanna said in the tower was said fully, not partially. But the plainness of Ned's asking, the way it is posed as something that simply needs to be established rather than as an accusation or a challenge, is not what Rhaegar was prepared for. "Septon Maynard," Rhaegar says. "A heart tree in Dawn, a ceremony done properly, before the old gods and before a witness who set his record down. She was willing." He pauses. "She was more than willing." Ned nods, slowly, taking this in the way he takes everything in. Then, "I know. She told me." The silence that follows is different from the one before. The first silence was 2 men taking stock of each other. This one is the settling of a fact. She told him. Not just the child's name or the need for protection. The full thing, the marriage, the choice she made and why she made it, told to Ned at the top of a tower in the mountains of Dawn while she was dying. She trusted him with the complete truth of it, and he has carried that complete truth alone for 2 years. Rhaegar looks at his hands on the table, the long fingers that everyone always said were a harper's hands. They are empty in the way hands are empty when there is nothing to do with them. Ned refills both cups. The sound of wine being poured is very ordinary for the room they are in. "Come inside properly," he says. "Eat if you need to. Sleep if you need to. We will talk in the morning." He pushes a cup across the table. "In the morning, you will tell me what you want, and what you will give me in exchange for it, and then we will decide together what happens after." Rhaegar nods. He takes the cup Ned pushes toward him and holds it in both hands. He does not drink, but he holds it. He has not been spoken to as an equal in a long time. The last time there were palaces around him, and a dynasty in front of him, and people who called him prince because they had to, which is a way of making the word mean less than it should. Here there is a man across a plain table in a cold northern room who is offering him the same hearing he would give any man who came to his gate with something to settle, and the absence of ceremony in it is not a slight. It is, Rhaegar understands, exactly what honest dealing looks like when it is not dressed to impress anyone. He holds the cup. He waits for morning. Outside, the steam from Winterfell's hot springs rises into the dark in the way it always does, indifferent to what is being decided inside its walls. Morning comes grey and cold to Winterfell. In the private chamber that the night before had contained a silence, and 2 cups of untouched wine, and an offer not yet completed, the fire has burned low, and the pale early light comes through the window, and Ned Stark and Rhaegar Targaryen sit across the table from each other in it. They have both slept, in the way that men sleep when they have an argument waiting for them in the morning, which is lightly and with one ear on the dark. Rhaegar speaks first. This is his request and his mourning, and he does not ask Ned to carry it for him. He speaks plainly and without decoration, which is the register he has found most honest in the 2 years since the Trident stripped away every other register available to him. The marriage to Lyanna was real and is documented. Septon Maynard kept the record in a journal, a volume that sits somewhere in the citadel at Old Town, and it names the parties and the date and the form of the ceremony conducted before the heart tree in dawn. By every law of succession that has governed the Iron Throne since the Targaryens raised it, the child sleeping somewhere above them in this castle is not a bastard. His name is Aegon Targaryen, 6th of his name, the legitimate son of Rhaegar Targaryen and Lyanna Stark. Rhaegar is his father. He is making no claim of any kind. He is asking for one thing only, which is what any father is owed by the basic fact of fatherhood: to know the child. Ned listens to all of this without interrupting. When Rhaegar stops speaking, Ned is quiet for a moment. "Lyanna made me promise," he says, "on her deathbed, with the last of what she had. What she made me promise was to protect the boy." He looks at Rhaegar without looking away. A Targaryen child in Robert Baratheon's kingdom is a death sentence. You know this. The legitimacy you're describing is not a gift you can give him. It is a sword aimed at him. The safest thing he can be is the bastard Snow. That name protects him. The name you want him to carry gets him killed, and everyone who knows he carries it along with him. "I am not asking him to carry it publicly," Rhaegar says. "You are asking me to let the one man alive who can prove his parentage get close to him. If you are taken, everything you know goes with you under interrogation. I have been the most wanted man in this realm for 2 years. That was true before I came through your gate. My presence here does not change what I already am." They sit with that. Then Rhaegar says, He was born of Targaryen blood and Stark blood, fire and ice. The texts I spent my life with call such a child the prince that was promised. He is the third head of the dragon. The prophecy points to him. Ned looks at him. The look goes on long enough that Rhaegar knows what is coming before Ned says it. "You believed in prophecy before," Ned says. His voice is not raised. The words arrive one at a time, with space around them. "You believed you were the prince that was promised. Then you believed Aegon was. And everyone around those prophecies is dead." He stands. He goes to the window and stands with his back to Rhaegar and his face toward whatever the grey morning is offering outside. Elaia is dead. Rhaenys is dead. Aegon is dead. Lyanna is dead. Every person prophecy touched is dead. He turns back, and you want to put it on a 2-year-old boy. The silence that follows this is not like the silences that came before it. It has a specific quality, the quality of an argument that has found the nerve it was looking for. Rhaegar does not answer immediately, and the reason he does not answer immediately is that he is not surprised. He heard this argument months ago, in his own mind, in an outbuilding in the Riverlands, with the smell of cold mud and dead leaves, sitting with the facts of what prophecy had produced. He set it down then. He thought he had set it down entirely. But it is one thing to set down a conviction in private, in the dark, when no one is watching, and another to have a man you barely know look at the full list of the dead and say plainly, "This is what you built with your belief, and you want to give it to a child." He has no argument against that. He has only the truth of why he is sitting in this room. "I did not come here because of prophecy," he says. "I came because he is my son." The sentence sits in the room without embellishment. Ned turns from the window. He looks at Rhaegar for a long time, with grey eyes that are, Rhaegar cannot help noticing, the same colour as the eyes of the child sleeping above them. Stark eyes, a stark face, the North's mark on a child who carries the blood of a dynasty the North helped bring down. "She chose you," Ned says finally. God knows why, but she did. He comes back to the table and stands behind his chair with both hands on it. "The promise she made me make was not about you. She was not protecting Jon from his father. She was protecting him from the war, from the crown, from what your name makes him in this kingdom, now and for as long as Robert Baratheon sits the throne." A pause. "Your name still makes him a target. That hasn't changed because you found your way here." "I know it," Rhaegar says. "That is exactly why I am not asking you to let the name be known." He looks at his hands on the table. The long fingers that were made, everyone always said, for a harp, and that have touched nothing of lasting consequence in 2 years of hiding and roads and cold rooms. They are the hands of a man who has stripped himself down to the single thing he is doing, which is this. "I will make no claim," he says. "I will not speak his true name outside this room. I will not send ravens. I will not approach Robert Baratheon or contact any lord of the realm. I will not return to Westeros as a Targaryen." He meets Ned's eyes. "I ask only to see him once. Here, with you present, and then I will leave." He pauses. "I ask Ned Stark to let a father see his son, not to let a prince claim a throne." Ned is still for a moment. He thinks about the 6 men who rode south with him to the Tower of Joy, and the 3 who came back from it, and the 2 who came back from that, and the 1 who has been carrying what they found inside ever since. He thinks about standing over Lyanna in the room at the top of a tower in dawn, with a promise forming in the air between her last breath and his next one, and what it cost to say yes, and what it has continued to cost in the years since. He has some experience with promises that are heavier than they appeared. He said yes to Lyanna. He looks at the man across the table who travelled the length of the kingdom on foot to make this ask, and he says it again. Once, he says, in the gods' wood, you, me, and the boy. You speak to no one else while you are in these walls. You leave before the household is awake. He holds Rhaegar's eyes. And you carry this the way I have been carrying it, alone, with no one to tell. Rhaegar nods. I know what it is to carry things alone. They sit in the pale early light, with the fire burned almost to ash, and the argument finished in the only way this kind of argument finishes, which is not with a winner, but with a shared burden, now carried by two people instead of one. There is nothing left to negotiate. The terms are spoken and accepted, and what remains is the mourning, and somewhere above them, the child who is the reason for all of it. Ned reaches for the wine pitcher, the same pitcher that sat on this table the night before, with both cups untouched. He pours 2 cups and pushes one across the table without ceremony. This time, Rhaegar drinks. They sit in the grey morning light, the man who kept the promise, and the man the promise was partly keeping the boy from. And between them is the largest secret in the 7 kingdoms, and it is asleep 2 stories above them, and does not know that it is a secret, or that this conversation happened, or that 2 men who were enemies at a river ford 2 years ago have just agreed, in a cold room in the north, to carry the same thing together. Before dawn, Winterfell is the quietest it gets, which is not very quiet because old castles are never truly quiet. The stone settles, the fires breathe, the wind finds the gaps in the mortar and uses them, but quiet in the way of a place that has sent its people to sleep and not yet called them back. The corridors are cold, and the torches at the corners have burned to red embers. Ned moves through them with Jon against his shoulder, the child heavy and warm and still mostly asleep, his dark head tucked into the curve of Ned's neck, his grey eyes barely open and taking in nothing. Jon is 2 years old. He does not know where he is being taken. He does not know that the answer matters. The Godswood door opens without noise. Ned has oiled the hinges himself at some point in the past week without explaining to anyone why. Inside, the Godswood is dark in the particular way of enclosed spaces in the early hours, the canopy above bare-branched, and the ground soft with old leaves. Ned has been here many times, in many weathers and for many reasons. He has come here with grief and with decision, and with the specific and private weight of a promise that has cost him more than he knew it would when he made it. He carries all of that in through the dark now, across the soft ground, toward the heart tree, whose pale bark holds what little light exists, even when there is almost none to hold. It is visible from the door. It is always visible from the door. Rhaegar is already there. He stands beneath the heart tree, looking up at the carved face in the weirwood. His back is to the path. He is very still. He has the wool on, the plain, dark wool that is the closest thing to a disguise available to a man with silver-gold hair and dark indigo eyes in a northern castle. And he has his hands clasped in front of him, and he does not turn until Ned's footsteps bring him close enough to hear. His colouring belongs to a different part of the world. The silver-gold hair and the dark indigo eyes are warm country things, the heritage of a lineage that came from across the narrow sea and never quite stopped looking like it had. In Winterfell's Godswood in the dark before dawn, he looks like something placed here from elsewhere, not quite fitted to the landscape. But the stillness fits anywhere. The stillness is entirely his own. Ned sets Jon down on his feet. Jon does not want to be set down, and makes this known by reaching up toward Ned's shoulder with both arms in the way of a child who has decided that being carried is the correct state of affairs. Then he sees the stranger beneath the tree. The reaching stops. Jon looks at Rhaegar with the focused and slightly unnerving attention that small children give to things they haven't encountered before, which is total and unblinking. Rhaegar is already kneeling. He went down into the snow before Ned set the child down, because he understood that a stranger who does not loom over a toddler gives the toddler the choice of how to proceed, and that choice mattered more to him than his knees. He has long, elegant fingers that were made for a harp. Everyone who ever heard him play said so, and he spent more years with those fingers on strings than doing almost anything else in his life. He was a different kind of known for it once, before the war made a different kind of known of him. The fingers are folded in his lap now, and he holds the rest of himself very still, because he is afraid that if he moves too quickly, the child will retreat, and this moment will become a different and lesser moment, and he cannot afford for this moment to be lesser. Jon takes 2 steps toward him. The steps have the forward-weighted quality of early walking, the momentum of a child who has not fully worked out the relationship between intention and balance. He covers the distance between himself and the stranger without apparent hesitation, reaches up a small hand, and touches Rhaegar's face. There is no particular purpose to the touch. It is not examination, and it is not greeting. It is the thing that small children do with everything new in the world, which is to press their hands against it to confirm that it is real. His fingers press at Rhaegar's cheek and pull slightly at the corner of his jaw, and are then withdrawn, because Jon has noticed the heart tree, and it is closer and whiter than the man's face, and presents new information. Rhaegar holds very still through all of this. He speaks. His words are quiet enough that they would not carry beyond the heart tree, and they belong to this place and this moment in the way that some things belong only to where they are spoken. The child's true name is said once, softly, before the carved face with its weeping red eyes. The name Lyanna spoke in a room at the top of a tower in dawn with her last breath. The name that belongs to this child by blood and by marriage and by the record of a septon who set it down in a journal that sits in the citadel, and by the witness of 2 heart trees, and by everything Rhaegar chose, and everything it cost. The old gods, if they are listening through the red eyes of their carved wood, hear it. The heart tree weeps its slow red sap. This is what it always does. The old stories give different accounts of why. After a time, Jon loses interest in the stranger and turns toward the heart tree itself. He puts both small palms flat against the white bark, the way Ned has seen him do before, pressing into the surface of it, cataloguing it the way he catalogues everything, which is through his hands. Rhaegar rises from the snow slowly. He brushes what has accumulated on his knees without hurry. They stand in the god's wood, the 2 of them and the child between them at the base of the heart tree, and there is nothing left to say. Everything was said in the cold room the night before. The terms are set, and the morning is here, and the rest is what follows from them. Rhaegar looks at Ned. He nods once, and the nod carries the weight of 2 men who met as enemies, and have arrived somewhere that neither of them would have named in advance. But that is, under the circumstances, what was available. He turns and walks toward the Godswood Gate. He does not look back. Not looking back is the hardest thing he has done since the Trident, and he has had considerable practice by now with hard things. The gate closes. Ned stands in the Godswood as the grey dawn comes up over Winterfell's walls, the sky moving from black to the particular dark grey of a northern morning that does not announce itself. Jon, at the foot of the heart tree, looks up at him and reaches up to be carried. Ned lifts him. The child is heavier than he was last month. He will be heavier still by next month. 2 secrets now, where there was one. They are both his to keep. The dragon had 3 heads. The first 2 died in King's Landing, the sack their only funeral rite, killed in rooms where their father's choices had left them when the walls came down. The third had been given a wolf's name and a wolf's colouring and a wolf's cold grey world to grow up in, and no one in that world would look at him and see anything except a Stark's bastard and a winter child. In the God's Wood of Winterfell, under the weeping eyes of the heart tree, the dragon who survived the hammer found what remained of everything that had cost him everything, and chose to leave it where it was safest, in the cold, in the north, in the arms of the man who had promised. Ned carries Jon back into the castle. The household will wake soon. The fires will be lit. Winterfell will do what Winterfell has always done, which is endure and hold what is given to it to hold. That's our theory. Westeros is a land filled with exciting stories and possibilities, and the what-ifs hidden inside its history are endless. This has been one of them. If it was worth your time,